I was folding laundry in the den when my nephew Marcus walked in and yanked the power cord from the wall. "Pack your bags, Aunt Helen. This house needs to be sold. I need the money now." My sister nodded from the doorway, unable to meet my eyes. I set down the towel I was holding, walked to my bedroom, and locked the door. The next morning, a woman in a charcoal suit rang the doorbell 3 times. Welcome to my channel, where I share real-life stories that matter. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Your support means everything. Now, let me tell you what happened next. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. That Tuesday afternoon, the television hummed softly in the den where I'd spent the last 6 years of my life. The afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains I'd sewn myself, the ones with the tiny roses along the border. My coffee sat cooling on a coaster, the same wooden coaster my late brother David had made in his workshop before the cancer took him. The house smelled of cinnamon from the apple cake I'd baked that morning, the recipe passed down from our grandmother. I was watching a gardening show, taking notes about pruning roses for the spring. At 73 years old, I still had plans. I still had purpose. I still had routines that kept me grounded in a world that had taken so much from me already. The front door didn't just open, it slammed. The sound cracked through the house like a gunshot, and I knew immediately who it was. Marcus had that way of entering spaces, as if his presence alone gave him ownership of everything within the walls. He appeared in the doorway, his expensive shoes tracking mud across my clean floors. Behind him, my younger sister Patricia hovered like a shadow, her designer handbag clutched to her chest, as if it could shield her from what was about to happen. She wouldn't look at me. That told me everything. I didn't move from my chair. I'd learned long ago that stillness was power, that reaction was weakness. Marcus stood there, breathing through his nose like an angry bull, and then he did it. He walked over to the television, gripped the power cord, and ripped it from the wall socket. The plug scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "Pack your bags, Aunt Helen." He said it like he was ordering lunch. "This house needs to be sold. I need the money now. The market's hot, and I've got buyers interested. You've been here long enough." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the kitchen faucet dripping 3 rooms away. I looked at Patricia, my sister, my baby sister, who I'd helped raise after our mother died. The same sister I'd lent $5,000 to when her first business failed. The same sister I'd housed for 6 months when her second divorce left her homeless. Say something, I thought. Tell him this is wrong. Tell him this is my home. Tell him your sister deserves better. Patricia adjusted her handbag strap and studied the floor. Her silence cut deeper than any words Marcus could have thrown at me. I stood up slowly. My knees complained, the arthritis that had been creeping in for the past decade making itself known. In that moment, watching my nephew smirk and my sister shrink, something crystallized inside me. Not anger. Anger would have been hot and immediate and fleeting. This was colder. This was understanding. They thought I was disposable. They thought 6 years of me maintaining this house, paying the utilities, keeping the garden beautiful, meant nothing compared to whatever Marcus wanted to buy with the equity. They thought an old woman had no power, no options, no voice that mattered. I set down my notepad with the rose pruning notes. I walked past Marcus without a word. I walked past Patricia without a glance. I went to my bedroom, the one that had been David's master suite, the one I'd redecorated after he died, with pale yellow walls and white furniture that made me feel peaceful. I locked the door behind me. Through the wood, I heard Marcus laugh. I heard him say something to Patricia about stubborn old women and how they always make things difficult. I heard Patricia's nervous giggle, that same sound she'd made as a child when she knew she was doing something wrong but was too scared to stop. I sat on the edge of my bed, the one with the quilt I'd stitched during the long nights after David's funeral. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from recognition. I was recognizing a pattern I'd been too kind to see before. 6 years ago, David died and left this house to both Patricia and me. Equal ownership, 50-50. He'd wanted to make sure we were both taken care of, that his illness wouldn't leave his family struggling. What David didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was that Patricia saw the house as an investment and me as a temporary inconvenience. I'd moved in to keep the house from sitting empty when the roof leaked. I'd replaced the water heater when it died in the middle of winter. I'd maintained the garden that David loved, keeping his roses alive when everything else about him was gone. I'd treated this house like it was mine, because legally, half of it was. But Patricia never lived here. She stayed in her downtown condo and sent Marcus to check on me like I was a tenant instead of an owner. Marcus, who worked in real estate, who saw dollar signs where other people saw memories. Marcus, who'd convinced his mother that selling was the smart move, that keeping the house was throwing money away, that Aunt Helen could just find a nice senior apartment somewhere. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It was a newer model, the kind young people assume old women don't know how to use. They're wrong about that, too. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Catherine Price, attorney at law. We'd served together on the library board for 12 years. She knew property law the way I knew David's garden, intimately and completely. The phone rang twice. Helen. Her voice was warm, familiar. What can I do for you? Catherine, I need to talk to you about property rights, specifically about what happens when one co-owner wants to sell and the other doesn't. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. This is about David's house. Yes. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? I looked at my locked bedroom door, at the suitcase Marcus probably expected to find packed when I emerged. No, but I need information. I need to know what my options are. And Catherine, I need to know what they can't do. I heard the smile in her voice when she responded. Now that I can definitely help you with. Tell me everything. I told her about Marcus's demand. I told her about Patricia's silence. I told her about 6 years of maintenance and utility payments and property taxes that I'd covered without asking Patricia to contribute because I'd thought we were family, not business partners. Catherine listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. Helen, they can't force you out. Not legally, not without a court order. And getting that court order would require them to prove the property needs to be sold, that partition is necessary, and that you've been uncooperative. From what you're telling me, you've been the only one cooperating. You've been the only one treating this like a home instead of a commodity. What do I need to do? First, don't leave. Don't pack. Don't give them any indication you're willing to vacate. Second, document everything. Every payment you've made, every repair, every expense. Third, come to my office tomorrow morning at 9. I'm going to draft a letter that will make very clear what your rights are and what their limitations are. I could hear Marcus and Patricia talking in the living room, their voices low and conspiratorial. What if they change the locks? They can't. They'd be locking out a legal owner. That's constructive eviction, and it's very, very illegal. If they try, you call the police immediately. Helen, I need you to hear me. You are not powerless here. You are not without recourse. You are a property owner who is being bullied, and bullies only win when good people don't fight back. I'm not good at fighting. Catherine laughed, soft and kind. You're calling a lawyer at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday and asking about property law instead of packing your bags like they demanded. Helen, you're already fighting. Now we're just going to make sure you win. We talked for another 20 minutes. She explained partition actions and co-tenancy rights and the difference between a sale and a buyout. She told me about fair market value and how any sale would require both owners to agree or a court to intervene. She told me about accounting for improvements and how my 6 years of payments could be calculated as credits against Patricia's share. By the time I hung up, my hands had stopped shaking. I had a plan. More importantly, I had information. And information was power in a way that anger never could be. I unlocked my bedroom door and walked back to the living room. Marcus was sprawled on the couch, my couch, scrolling through his phone. Patricia was examining David's collection of vintage books, probably estimating their resale value. They both looked up when I entered. Marcus smirked. Bags packed, Aunt Helen? I sat down in my chair, the blue velvet one I'd reupholstered last spring. I picked up my cold coffee and took a sip. No. The smirk faltered. What? I'm not packing. I'm not leaving. This is my home. I own 50% of this property, and I'm not interested in selling. Marcus's face reddened. He glanced at Patricia, waiting for her to intervene. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Helen, be reasonable, she finally managed. We can't keep maintaining this house forever. You haven't maintained it at all, I said calmly. I have, for 6 years. I've paid utilities. I've paid for repairs. I've paid property taxes when you've been late with your share. I've treated this house with respect because it was David's, and he wanted both of us to have security. But you've treated it like an ATM you can cash out whenever Marcus decides he needs investment capital. Patricia's face went white. That's not... We weren't. We just thought... You thought I'd be easy to push around, I finished. You thought an old woman living alone wouldn't fight back. You thought wrong. Marcus stood up, and for the first time, I saw something other than arrogance in his expression. Uncertainty. Look, Aunt Helen, I didn't mean to be harsh. Mom needs the money. We all do. The house is sitting here, appreciating, and it makes financial sense to sell while the market's good. It makes financial sense for you, I corrected. It makes emotional sense for me to stay in my home. Those two things don't have to be in conflict unless you make them. If Patricia needs money, I'm happy to discuss a buyout. She can sell me her share and everyone gets what they want. We don't have to sell to you, Marcus said quickly. We can force a partition sale. The court will order it sold and split the proceeds. You can try, I said. And it'll take months, maybe a year. And you'll pay legal fees. And at the end, you might not get what you want anyway, because I have documentation showing I've maintained and improved the property for 6 years, while Patricia has contributed nothing. A judge might decide I'm entitled to credits against the sale proceeds. You might end up with less than you think. You talk to a lawyer. Patricia's voice was small, wounded. "I talked to a friend who happens to be a lawyer. Because when family stops treating you like family, you need professionals who'll treat you like a client. Tomorrow morning, you'll both receive a letter outlining my position. You can respond through your own attorney. Until then, I'd appreciate it if you left. I have a cake to finish and a garden to plan." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but Patricia put a hand on his arm. "Let's go," she said quietly. "We need to talk." They left, and this time the door didn't slam. It closed softly, almost apologetically. I sat in my blue velvet chair for a long time after they were gone, listening to the silence. It wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt different, earned. That evening, I called Catherine back and told her how the conversation had gone. She laughed and told me I'd done perfectly. We scheduled a meeting for 9 the next morning, and she told me to bring every receipt, every check, every piece of documentation I had. I spent that night going through my files. David had taught me to keep records, to save receipts, to document everything. He'd been meticulous about paperwork, said it saved headaches later. I'd inherited that habit, thank God. I found utility bills going back 6 years, all in my name, all paid from my checking account. I found receipts for the new water heater, the roof repair, the garden supplies, the paint for the exterior. I found property tax statements showing I'd paid the full amount when Patricia's half was late. I found estimates for work I'd done, canceled checks, credit card statements. By midnight, I had a folder 3 inches thick. It was organized, labeled, highlighted. It was armor. At 9 the next morning, I walked into Catherine's office, carrying that folder and wearing my best navy suit, the one I'd worn to David's funeral. Catherine took one look at the documentation and whistled low. "Helen, this is gold, absolute gold. You've essentially been maintaining the entire property while Patricia's been a silent partner. In property law, that matters. That matters a lot." We spent 2 hours going through everything. Catherine took notes, asked questions, pulled out law books, and showed me statutes. She explained that in a partition action, the court looks at who's been contributing to the property, who's been maintaining it, who's been acting like an owner. My 6 years of documented payments and improvements put me in a very strong position. "Here's what's going to happen," Catherine said, leaning back in her chair. "I'm going to send Patricia and Marcus a letter today. It's going to lay out your position very clearly. You're willing to buy out Patricia's share at fair market value, minus credits for your 6 years of payments and improvements. Or, if she insists on selling, you'll support that only if the proceeds are divided fairly with those same credits applied. If they want to fight, we'll go to court, and I promise you, we'll win. What if they just keep pushing? What if Marcus tries something else? Then we document it, and it becomes evidence of harassment. Helen, the law is on your side here. You just have to be willing to use it." The letter went out that afternoon. By evening, Patricia called me. Not Marcus, Patricia herself, which was a first in 6 years. "Helen, we need to talk." Her voice was different, smaller. "Can I come over?" I considered saying no, considered making her stew in whatever discomfort Marcus's terrible legal position had created. But she was still my sister, even if she'd forgotten I was hers. "Come at 7, I said. "I'll make coffee." She arrived exactly at 7, alone. No Marcus, no designer handbag shield. She looked older than she had the day before, or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time in years. I made coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table, David's table, the one he'd refinished the summer before he got sick. Patricia wrapped her hands around her mug and stared into it like it held answers. "I didn't know," she finally said, "about all the payments, about all the work you've done. Marcus told me the house was just sitting here, that you were living rent-free, that it was time to cash out. I've never lived rent-free anywhere in my life," I said quietly. "I've paid my way. Always. I know that now. Your lawyer's letter made it very clear." "Helen, I'm sorry. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked questions. I should have treated you like a partner instead of letting Marcus treat you like a squatter. Why didn't you say anything yesterday? When Marcus was being cruel, why didn't you stop him?" Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm weak. Because Marcus is loud and confident and makes me feel stupid when I disagree with him. Because it was easier to let him handle things than to think about what we were really doing. I told myself it was just business, just practical. I didn't let myself think about how it would feel to be you, to be told to pack up and leave your home. It felt like being erased," I said. "Like 6 years of my life didn't matter. Like David's wishes didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. You matter." She reached across the table and took my hand, and I let her. "You've always mattered. I've been a terrible sister, and I'm sorry." "What do you want, Patricia?" "The truth, not what Marcus wants. What do you want?" She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I don't want to sell David's house. I never did. But Marcus kept talking about investment opportunities and market timing and how stupid it was to let equity sit unused. He made it sound like keeping the house was irresponsible, like I was being sentimental and foolish. David wanted us to have security," I said. "That was the point. Security isn't just money. It's having a place to be, a place to belong. This house has given me that, and I took it away, or tried to. You did. But here's what I'm offering now. I'll buy you out. Fair market value for your half, minus what I've put in over 6 years. Catherine ran the numbers. It's still a significant amount. You'll have money for whatever you need, and I'll have the home David wanted me to have." "What about Marcus?" "What about him?" I said, harder than I meant to. "He's your son, Patricia, not your keeper. He doesn't get to decide your life any more than he gets to decide mine." She smiled for the first time, weak but real. "You sound like David. He used to say that about Marcus too, said I let him bully me." David was a smart man. We talked for another hour. She asked about the buyout terms, and I showed her Catherine's calculations. She asked about timeline, and I told her we could close within 60 days if she agreed. She asked if we could still be sisters after this, and I told her that was up to her. When she left, she hugged me at the door. A real hug, not the perfunctory kind we'd been exchanging for years. "I'll talk to my lawyer tomorrow," she said. "Not Marcus's friend, my own lawyer. And Helen, thank you for fighting back, for showing me what spine looks like." I closed the door behind her and stood in the quiet house. David's house, my house, the place where I'd learned that kindness without boundaries is just weakness in disguise, that family doesn't get a pass on cruelty, that an old woman with documents and a good lawyer is a force to be reckoned with. The next week moved quickly. Patricia hired her own attorney, a woman who apparently asked very pointed questions about Marcus's involvement and Patricia's financial needs. The lawyers talked, numbers were exchanged, appraisals were ordered. Marcus called me once, angry and accusatory. "You're stealing from my mother," he said. "That house is worth more than you're offering." "The house is worth exactly what the appraiser says it's worth," I replied. "And your mother's share is worth exactly half that, minus 6 years of maintenance she never contributed to. If you think you can do better in court, you're welcome to try. My lawyer would love the billable hours." He hung up without another word. I smiled and went back to my roses. Spring pruning waited for no one's drama. 3 weeks later, Patricia and I sat in Catherine's office and signed the paperwork. Bank checks were exchanged, titles were transferred, deeds were recorded. When it was done, I owned David's house outright. Patricia had a check for $215,000, and Marcus had no say in anything anymore. Outside the office, Patricia paused before getting in her car. "Are you going to stay there forever?" "As long as I'm able," I said. "After that, we'll see. Maybe I'll sell it myself one day. Maybe I'll leave it to someone who'll appreciate it. Maybe I'll turn it into a sanctuary for women who need a place to be. I don't know, but it'll be my choice." She nodded. "That's how it should be." "Helen, I meant what I said. I'm sorry. For all of it." "I know. And Patricia, thank you for making the right choice eventually. That matters too." She drove away, and I went home. My home. Entirely, legally, irrevocably mine. That evening, I sat in my blue velvet chair with a cup of tea and called Catherine. "Just wanted to say thank you for everything. You did the work, Helen. I just gave you the tools." "How does it feel?" "Like I can breathe again," I said. "Like the walls aren't closing in. Like I matter in my own story." "You always mattered. You just needed to believe it enough to fight for it." After we hung up, I walked through the house, room by room. The kitchen where I baked David's favorite recipes. The den where I watched my gardening shows. The bedroom where I quilted on winter nights. The garden where David's roses bloomed every June. Every space was mine now. Not half mine. Not conditionally mine. Not at the mercy of someone else's financial plans. Mine. I thought about all the women who'd faced similar moments, who'd been told to pack up and make way for someone else's priorities. I thought about how many of them didn't have Catherine's number, didn't have documentation, didn't have the stubbornness to say no when everyone expected yes. The next day, I went to the library where Catherine and I had served together. I found the head librarian and asked about starting a program, something for women who needed information about property rights, tenant rights, financial planning, something that would give them the tools I'd been lucky enough to have. Within a month, we had a monthly seminar set up. Catherine donated her time. A financial planner volunteered. A social worker came to talk about resources. We called it Know Your Worth, and we held it in the library's community room every third Tuesday. The first session, 8 women showed up. By the third month, we had a waiting list. Women of all ages, all situations, all facing moments where someone expected them to step aside, give in, make themselves smaller. One woman's son wanted her to reverse mortgage her house to fund his business. One woman's brother was pressuring her to sell their inherited property. One woman's boyfriend had moved in and was now claiming squatters' rights. One woman's landlord was trying to evict her without proper notice. We gave them information. We gave them referrals. We gave them permission to say no, to stand firm, to believe they deserved space in the world. At the 6-month mark, Catherine and I sat in my garden with iced tea and watched the roses bloom. David's roses, thriving under my care. "You started something important," Catherine said. "Those women at the library, they're learning what you learned. That power comes from knowledge, that rights matter, that documentation is armor." "I just wish I hadn't needed to learn it the way I did," I said. "I wish Patricia had seen me as a person instead of an obstacle. I wish Marcus had seen a home instead of dollar signs. But they didn't, and you fought anyway. That's the lesson. Not that family won't disappoint you, because they will, but that you can survive the disappointment and come out stronger." I looked at my house, at the yellow walls visible through the window, at the garden I'd maintained through heartbreak and conflict and stubborn determination. She was right. I had survived. More than that, I'd won. Marcus never apologized. I didn't expect him to. Men like that don't apologize. They just move on to easier targets. But he did stop calling, stop showing up, stop making demands. The lawyer's letters had made clear that avenue was closed. Patricia and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. We had lunch once a month at a cafe downtown. We talked about safe things at first, weather and books and neighborhood gossip. Eventually, we talked about David, about our childhood, about the women we'd become. She asked once if I forgave her. I told her I was working on it, that forgiveness wasn't a light switch, but a process. She accepted that, said she was working on forgiving herself too. A year after the buyout, Patricia showed up at my door with a potted plant and a nervous smile. "I know you don't need my approval," she said, "but I drove by yesterday and saw what you've done with the garden. It's beautiful, Helen. David would love it." I invited her in for coffee. We sat at the kitchen table and talked about roses and property values and the right way to prune hydrangeas. It was easy, comfortable. It was what sisters should have been all along. Before she left, she paused at the door. "I'm proud of you, for fighting back, for not letting us bully you out of your home, for showing me what strength looks like." "I'm proud of you too," I said, "for making the right choice in the end, for listening when I said no, for letting me have this." She hugged me, and this time there was no awkwardness, no holding back, just two sisters who'd found their way back to each other through conflict and consequence and the slow work of rebuilding trust. After she left, I stood in my living room and looked at the family photos on the wall. David at his graduation, Patricia and me as children, our parents on their wedding day, Marcus as a baby, before he'd learned to see people as transactions. I thought about adding a new photo, one of me in my garden, surrounded by blooming roses and the security I'd fought for. A reminder that the story didn't end with someone else's demand. It ended with my refusal, my resistance, my reclamation of space. 2 years after that confrontation in my living room, I'm still here, still in David's house, still maintaining the garden, still hosting the library seminars, still living proof that an old woman with documentation and determination can win. The house is exactly as I want it now. I repainted the living room a soft sage green. I replaced the old couch with something more comfortable. I hung new curtains and bought fresh flowers for the table every week. I made it mine in ways that went deeper than legal ownership. And every time I sit in my blue velvet chair with my coffee and my gardening shows, I remember the moment Marcus pulled that power cord from the wall. The moment he assumed I'd fold, pack up, disappear. I remember it not with anger, but with gratitude. Because that moment taught me something I'd forgotten in 6 years of quiet accommodation. It taught me that I was still strong, still capable, still willing to fight for what mattered. The property deed is framed now, hanging in my study where I can see it every day. Owner: Helen Margaret Foster. No co-owners, no complications, just my name and my rights and my home. Sometimes at the library seminars, women ask how I found the courage to fight. They ask where strength comes from when family turns on you, when the people who should protect you become the people you need protection from. I tell them the truth. Courage doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from knowing your worth. It comes from documentation and good lawyers and the stubborn refusal to disappear just because someone finds you inconvenient. It comes from understanding that kindness doesn't mean weakness, that grace doesn't mean surrender, that love doesn't obligate you to sacrifice yourself. I tell them about David, about his careful record-keeping and his belief that preparation mattered. I tell them about Catherine, about the importance of having professionals who see you as a client worthy of respect. I tell them about Patricia, about how even broken relationships can sometimes be repaired if both people are willing to do the work. But mostly, I tell them about that moment of clarity when Marcus pulled the plug and I realized I had a choice. I could be the easy target they assumed I was, or I could be the obstacle they didn't expect. I could fold, or I could fight. I chose to fight, and I won. The house is quiet now, the good kind of quiet that comes from peace instead of tension. The garden blooms every spring with David's roses and the new varieties I've added. The library seminars continue, growing every year, reaching more women who need to hear that they matter, that they have options, that documentation is power. And me? I sit in my blue velvet chair with my coffee and my garden plans, content in the knowledge that this space is mine, that I earned it not once when David left it to me, but twice when I refused to let it be taken away. Marcus never comes around anymore. I heard through Patricia that he moved to another city, something about a job opportunity. I didn't ask for details. Some people exit your life and you don't need to understand why. You just need to let them go. Patricia visits once a month now. We're working on it, on being sisters again, on building something real instead of something convenient. It's slow and sometimes awkward, but it's honest. That's worth more than easy. Last week, she brought me a cutting from her own garden, a rose bush that had belonged to our mother. We planted it together in David's garden, in a sunny
near the fence. She cried a little, and so did I, but they were good tears, healing tears. "You were right to fight," she said as we patted dirt around the roots. "I see that now. You were right about everything." "I wasn't right about everything," I corrected gently. "But I was right about knowing my worth, about refusing to be pushed out of my own life, about documentation and lawyers and the power of no." She laughed. "You sound like your seminars." "Good. It means I'm practicing what I preach." We watered the new rose bush and sat on the porch with lemonade, watching the sun set over the garden. It felt like peace. It felt like home. It felt like everything I'd fought for. That evening, after Patricia left, I walked through the house one more time. Every room told a story now, not just David's story or Patricia's story, or the story of family conflict and legal battles. My story. The story of a woman who was told to pack her bags and refused, who was told to disappear and stayed visible, who was told she didn't matter and proved them wrong with documentation, determination, and a lawyer who believed in property rights. In my study, I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I planted a rose bush with my sister, the same sister who tried to evict me 2 years ago, the same sister who chose her son's greed over her sister's home, the same sister who is learning, slowly, what family actually means. I forgive her, not because she deserves it yet, but because I deserve peace, because holding on to anger is heavier than the weight of this entire house, because I won, and winners can afford to be gracious. But I don't forget. I keep the documentation. I keep Catherine's number. I keep the memory of what it felt like to be dismissed, to be assumed powerless, to be told I don't matter. And I use that memory at the seminars every third Tuesday when women walk in carrying the same weight I carried. I tell them my story. I show them my deed. I remind them that old women with records and lawyers and the courage to say no can change the entire trajectory of their lives. This house is mine. These roses are mine. This peace is mine. I earned it twice. I will never take it for granted again." I closed the journal and looked around my study, the framed property deed on the wall, the folders of documentation that had saved me, the thank you cards from women at the library who'd found their own strength. This was success, not money or status or someone else's approval. Success was sitting in a house I owned, drinking coffee I chose, watching shows I enjoyed, planting gardens I would maintain. Success was peace earned through resistance, victory won through documentation. Outside my window, David's roses swayed in the evening breeze. The house settled around me with the comfortable creaks of a structure that had weathered storms and come through stronger. In the distance, a dog barked. A car passed. Life continued, ordinary and precious, and mine. I smiled and thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, watching a gardening show in a house I thought was secure. I thought about how quickly security can be threatened, how easily family can become adversary, how important it is to know your rights before someone tries to take them away. But I also thought about resilience, about the human capacity to fight back, to stand firm, to refuse erasure. I thought about all the women at the library who were learning the same lessons, who were building their own armor out of documents and knowledge and professional support. We were a quiet revolution, women who said no when the world expected yes, women who valued their own space as much as anyone else's, women who understood that power doesn't always look like shouting and demands. Sometimes it looks like documentation. Sometimes it looks like a property deed with one name on it. Sometimes it looks like an old woman in a blue velvet chair who refused to pack her bags. I turned off the lamp and headed to bed, walking through my house, touching the walls that belonged entirely to me. Tomorrow I'd work in the garden. Tomorrow I'd prepare for the next library seminar. Tomorrow I'd live the life I'd fought to keep. But tonight, I'd sleep in a house that was mine, in a room I'd chosen, in a bed I'd bought with my own money. And that, more than any legal victory, any family reconciliation, any public recognition, was everything. I'd been told to get out. I'd stayed quiet just long enough to gather my weapons, and then I'd won in the way that mattered most, not by destroying anyone, not by seeking revenge, but by simply refusing to be moved. The house was mine, the peace was mine, the victory was mine. And tomorrow morning, when the sun rose over David's garden, I'd be here to see it. In my home, on my terms, exactly where I belonged. I'm so grateful you stayed with me through this journey. If this story meant something to you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What city are you watching from? What time is it where you are? Have you ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours? Share your story below. I read every single comment, and your experiences matter. See you in the next video, and remember, you are never too old, too quiet, or too kind to stand up for yourself. Documentation and determination can change everything.